Hi, I'm Jess with Canine Perspective, and this video is about what separates our in-person training programs versus other training programs. Uh, Main thing is when possible, being in Chicago, when the weather permits, we train out at Oz Park. Oz Park is the busiest park in Chicago. I actually know this as a fact just because one of my clients, her daughter did the studies of each park to see how much people use them, and then Oz Park was at the top. And if you've ever been to Oz Park, especially during the summer, during a nice day, you've experienced it yourself, and that's where we like to train, right in the thick of it. You know, there's dogs, off-leash dogs, skateboarders, rollerbladers, bicyclists, baseball games. I've seen jazz bands. There was a hot dog stand this past, summer of 23. So there's a lot going on. And we like to train right in that environment. Every now and then I might get a case that's a reactive case that's very severe that I'll suggest having the first class at my facility, just so we can work in a controlled context. And then by the second class, the owner is like ready to be out in the distraction filled environment of Oz Park. But with the way that I've kind of developed my training program is now I'm able to verbally coach the owner through everything. Very, very rarely do I ever need to handle the dog or jump in to help the owner. 99% of the time, the owner's just doing it themselves, which is nice because especially if you're dealing with a behavior case, learning how to de-escalate your dog when it becomes reactive, how to control the situation, how to contain the situation, in case we're in the early stages of training and we're not far enough along yet that we can just shut down the reactivity. I'm telling the owner and teaching the owner how to do all these things real time as the moment arises. So, I had a case, a dog, his name is Georgia, one of the most reactive cases I've had in the year of 2023. Not a big dog, 20-pound dog or so. And the first class was very difficult because the dog was super reactive. Owner unfortunately did not get her collar in time, so I had to use my pit bull's collar, but the collar wouldn't go down to the appropriate size. It also wasn't the appropriate output for her particular case. So the first class was kind of rough, but we worked through it. I worked, I taught her stuff and everything like that. And I said, we're gonna try this for this week until your collar comes. So it's real time because the two most common things that we address here, or that most dog owners want to address, is leash pulling and leash reactivity. And owners really don't want to wait until later in the program to start addressing these things, and we don't have to. With my method of training, that I kind of, how would you say, tweaked from the Richard Hines method of training, is we cut out all the stuff that's not unnecessary. Like we don't need to use positive reinforcement or anything like that. It's simply the remote collar, prong collar if needed, leash and the owner. I've created very easily understandable and replicable exercises for the owner to then practice and apply after their session that will also get them results. Okay, so throughout the years, especially early on in my training, I've learned that if people aren't motivated, they won't continue with the training. And this is something when I was purely positive reinforcement training in the beginning, that I noticed is that, if a dog owners weren't getting the results with the positive reinforcement within a couple of weeks, like they're just like, giving up, and they're like, it's not gonna work for my dog. So that as I start to advance my training, and I advance to remote collar work, and especially since I've developed this newer method, at least for myself, it's almost instantaneous. Almost within the first, maybe second class, we're already getting drastic changes in behavior. How'd it go this week?
It actually went great.
Yeah.
Or for us, it was great.
Okay.
I don't know if
Not for her.
your standards, well, I don't know your standards, how good it was, but
Sure.
it was, I've never enjoyed walking with her so much.
Good.
Made me want to walk more because
Yeah, that's
it
usually
was,
what happens. That the owner is now motivated to continue and apply the training because they're like, oh yeah, this is actually working. And it's easy to understand. It doesn't require a whole lot. I like to refer to myself as the lazy man's dog trainer, simply because once we've taught the obedience in class, it's simply a matter of practicing and applying that obedience in your daily life. Okay, so that's a big thing about our training program is I'm training you to practice and apply your training in the real world environment, which again is why we work out of Oz Park when possible. Is we're right there and you're seeing your dog heel right next to you within 10 to 15 minutes of the first class in a very busy environment. It's like, okay, this is working. And if it'll work here at Oz Park, then this should work in any other environment. Okay. And then we just start to build on things. So the first class is always going to be on heel, almost always. Very, very rare that I get a case where I have to work on the behavior first. Example would be like with Georgia, when we started her session, she was so reactive. I had to just start correcting her right away at a high level to start to get her to at least calm down so I could teach the owner. Otherwise, if she was reactive the whole time, I would have had to scream the entire time to get over the barking, and then the owner would have a hard time hearing me. So in that particular case, I have to jump into behavior first, start curbing that reactivity so that I could settle it down, and then communicate with the owner and start teaching the obedience. But 99% of the time, it's the other way around. It's obedience first and then behavior after. So the first two classes are always going to be on heel. There are exceptions here. Sometimes, we get clients who they have a behavior that they need to address as soon as possible, but the first class does have to be heel. And then from the second class going forward, I can, for the most part, play it by ear. Okay. So we don't follow any real kind of cookie cutter structure. There is a structure, like a general structure, but sometimes things happen where the owner's like, hey, I really want to work on resource guarding, or I really want to work on separation anxiety. So as long as we've covered heel on the first class, I, for the most part, can deviate and tackle other things that the owner may want to address, okay? But for generally speaking, a structure would be like, for example, a 6-week program would be 2 classes on heel. If this is strictly obedience, the 3rd class, I'm jumping straight into recall because recall takes the longest to teach. The 4th class is typically stationary control, like place command. The 5th and 6th class, in some cases, the owners will want to learn how to advance their dog's training to already start building to an off-leash level for at least the heel and the recall. In some cases, the owner wants to learn things like stay or sit and down, which we can also cover within a class. In cases where there's behavioral issues, I always tell them that classes, the first 2 classes have to be on heel, excluding any behavioral stuff. And typically, I like to jump into behavior by the 3rd class, just because the dog has had now 2 weeks of conditioning with the e-collar. The owner has had 2 weeks of conditioning with the e-collar. They understand the e-collar and how it's applied and all that stuff. We have a much better concept of what the dog's working levels are, that when we start targeting things, we know kind of where to jump from and start, addressing things efficiently. So during the wintertime, we do meet at my facility located west of the West Loop in Chicago, Illinois. For our behavioral cases like reactivity and stuff, where we meet doesn't really matter. Oz Park is great for the client because the client likes training, the experience of training in the busy environment. However, when it comes to whether or not the training will apply when we go from a controlled environment like my facility to an uncontrolled environment like a Chicago public park, it doesn't matter because the way that I teach is meant for the owner to be able to understand and then turn around and apply it as they start to tweak it and apply it as they live their life with their dog. So if their dog is dog reactive, for example, we have the first class on heel. I'll give them a couple of basic instructions and then they'll go off and start applying it. They come back week 2. They're like, oh yeah, reactivity is 50% better, but I did the couple of things that you taught me to control the situation and it helped out a lot. I go, great, now we're gonna make some more tweaks, to work on the rest of the reactivity, work on the second half of heel, so on and so forth, go off, rinse and repeat, okay? So it's a very common sense, logical based methodology. It's very simple, doesn't require you to become a dog trainer to learn how to train your dog. You don't need a whole lot of skill set. The only time where there's going to be more time invested in the training is when we're trying to advance our training. For example, if you're trying to build towards off leash, then you have to go to a park and go through all the exercises and dedicate more time and effort, obviously, because you're wanting a higher level of training. But in a very simple, straightforward, like 6-week program, when it's just standard recall, that needs to be trained at an off-leash level. Recall is really the only command that requires you to go somewhere and practice. Heel is practice during a walk. Place can be practiced inside the home. Sit and down can be practiced inside the home. Stay can be practiced out while you're out on the walk. So 5 out of the 6 commands that we teach, sit, stay down, come, place, heel, can be practiced regularly. And it's really just a recall that requires a dog owner to like actively go out of their way to train it. Okay, which is why recall takes the longest to teach. Because you have to, make time to go somewhere and all that stuff, which is why I like to try to jump into recall by the 3rd class of a program, because I know it's going to take a long time. So while we have classes 4, 5, and 6, the owners can ask me questions if anything comes up with the recall. In the longer programs, if a dog owner is wanting to build towards off-leash reliability, we tend to space out the latter classes. Like usually around classes 8 or 9, I'll tell the owner, you have almost everything you need to get to an off-leash level. You just need to rinse and repeat and practice, make mistakes and screw up things. So typically by like class 9 or so, I'll tell the owner, go off, practice, come back when you're ready. And I might see them 2 months later and they'll show me where they're at. And then we'll have class 10. And then I'll help advance or tweak anything. They'll go off again, come back a month or so later, class 11. I've even had clients do half a program one summer and then come back and do the latter half of the program the next summer to give them time to practice during the fall and winter. So in terms of like scheduling the classes and everything, we're for the most part week by week, unless we're doing more advanced stuff or behavioral stuff as well, because with behavior you do need time to rinse and repeat all the exercises, make sure that they're working. If we hit a plateau, or if we hit like a wall with the behavior stuff, then the owner will come back, we'll work on some things, and they'll go off and do their homework. So it's not really cut and dry where it can be week by week. It will be in the beginning, but in some cases, it's on an as needed basis, because that works best for the dog owner and the dog to make sure that they get to the end result that they're wanting. Okay. Other than that, that's what separates our in-person training versus other in-person trainings. And I'm Jesse with Canine Perspective, and thank you for watching.